I'm Mo. This is the first year that I've really paid attention to any book awards. I'm sure that has everything to do with being on Booktube. And since the winner of several of those book awards are going to be announced very soon, it got me thinking to see if I had ever read any of the major book awards winners. So I have been following people who liked to watch the Women's Prize and the Booker Award, the International Booker Award, and also the National Book Award, but I haven't seen very many people with some of these other prizes. I know that Greg from Supposedly Fun has a Pulitzer Prize challenge that they're kind of working their way through. The book awards that I looked into were the National Book Awards, the Booker Prize, the International Booker Prize, the Hugo Awards, the Retro Hugo Awards, the Nebula Book Awards, the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction and the Pulitzer Prize for Nonfiction, the Stonewall Awards for Literature, the Edgar Awards, and the Women's Prize. I went through my books to see if there were any of the National Book Award for Fiction or for Nonfiction that I had read, since that is the prize that is soon to be announced. And there are not. I have never read any of those books. There were some on the list that seemed interesting and that I might want to or end up reading in the future, but I didn't have any that I'd actually read. And then that got me thinking about the Booker Award. I have never read a winner of the Booker Award, but I have read one of the books on the shortlist, and that was A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. This is a short book about a young man who is coming home after World War I, and he gets a job as a mural restorer. And it's about a month that he spends working in a countryside church restoring a mural, and how that mural affects him and how the town affects him and what he kind of plans to go on and do with his life. A Month in the Country was on the 1980 list. I also read another off the short list of the Booker, which was Time's Arrow by Martin Amis. I talked about this book with one of my best friends, Isaac, who reads, in my video, My Friend Who Reads with Isaac, how we had read this one a long time ago together. Time's Arrow was on the 1991 list. Next, I looked at the International Booker Prize, and I have not read any books from the International Booker Prize. The International Booker Prize is for translated work. Next, I looked at the Women's Prize, and I believe this just encompasses all women authors, and I have not read any books off of the Women's Prize. I do really want to read Piranesi. I have read several of the winners from the Pulitzer Prize. It's weird because when I started pulling books for this video, I realized that many of the book prize winners that I read this year. One of the winners of the Pulitzer Prize won the prize in 1953, and that was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I read this one earlier this year, and you can see my thoughts more in my Booktube Spin 3 Ernest Hemingway vlog. This is about an old man who is nearing the end of his time as a fisherman, but he goes out on one more fishing escapade to try and salvage his reputation and his name. I also read the 1961 winner of the Pulitzer Prize. That was To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't own a copy of that anymore, and I read that one way back in high school, but I do remember liking that one. The 2020 winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction was The Nickel Boys, and I read that earlier this year too. I didn't grab my copy to do this video. This is about a young man who is wrongfully imprisoned in a Reformation school in Florida, and it's about his life there and after he escapes. I really enjoyed that book. It's definitely in the contender for one of my favorite books of 2021. I've also read one book from the Pulitzer Prize for Nonfiction, but it was only shortlisted in 1995, and that is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil by John Brent. I really love this book. I read it because of the movie. I love the movie so much. It's one of my all-time favorite films, and I really wanted to read the backstory of it. I think it's almost time for a reread of this. It's about a reporter who goes to Savannah, Georgia to do a puff piece for a home magazine on one of the rich estates, but the owner ends up involved in a shooting. I have never read any of the books on the Stonewall Prize. This is a prize for gay and LGBTQIA+ books. This is one that I'd like to pay attention to in the future and hopefully read more of the books that have won in the past and more that will be nominated in the future. Now we definitely move on to book prizes that I've read more of the winners from. One of the book prizes that I would also like to pay attention to and is right up my street is the Edgar Awards. These are an award for mystery and mystery thriller books. This year I read New Orleans Morning by Julie Smith. This won the Edgar Award in 1991. This is the first book in the Skip Langdon series where we meet Skip. She's a new police officer in the New Orleans PD and she is struggling. She's a woman in a man's industry. She is a woman in a bigger body, and she's a woman who, although she comes from a rich background, struggles against that to be able to help people from all walks of life. I really like these. I've read 2 in the Skip Langdon series and I read them out of order, but now I've been getting them in order, so I have the next one on my TBR shelf to read soon. I've also read 2 books that were shortlisted for the Edgar Awards. In 1974, An Unsuitable Job for a Woman by P.D. James was nominated for the shortlist. This is the first P.D. James book I ever read and got me on a streak of reading tons of P.D. James. I'm working my way through her entire back catalog and I'm really having fun doing so. She was also shortlisted in 1972 for Shroud for a Nightingale. I read this one last year. This is a Detective Dalgleish novel where Dalgleish finds himself in a nurse's teaching hospital. Several murders occur that he has to solve. The next 3 book prizes that I have read some off of are very similar. They're the Hugo Awards, the Retro Hugo Awards, and the Nebula Awards. These are all book awards for sci-fi books, and I have read quite a few off of these. For the Nebula Awards, I've read the winner in 1966, which was Dune. Dune is by Frank Herbert, and probably you already know about it if you are into the book world or sci-fi, because there's a new Dune movie that just recently came out starring Timothée Chalamet. This book is about Paul, who is a young son of a duke in outer space where the different planets have different resources that are coveted, and their family is moving to this planet of Dune where spice is mined. The spice is precious. It not only flavors food and coffee, but it can give the consumer otherworldly abilities if taken in large quantities. In 1971, David Niven's Ringworld won the Nebula Award. I've talked about this book quite a few times. This is about Louis Wu, who is getting older and he's not happy that that's happening to him. Although there's been amazing advances in regeneration and prolonging youth, Louis Wu needs adventure in his life. So when he is asked by a very unusual alien to go on a mission to find a mythical ring world, he jumps at the chance to add a spark to his life. In 1986, Ender's Game won the Nebula Award. This is a classic academic sci-fi. It has a really interesting premise of young people being trained to fight in a war against aliens, but because it's almost dark academia, because it's sci-fi academia, and because its characters are so young, it has a really interesting look at how these characters would deal with learning about this war and educating themselves to fight this war. In 2003, the winner was American Gods. The Retro Hugos were put out after the regular Hugos had been around for a long time, but they deal with books that were published before the regular Hugos were started. And I've only read one winner of the Retro Hugos, and that was the winner in 1954, and that was Fahrenheit 451. This is a super famous sci-fi novel about a time in the not too distant future where books and education and learning are banned and everyone is supposed to watch TV and do as they're told. And our story follows a fireman whose job it is to burn books, but he discovers that there might be more to books than people have led him to believe. In the regular Hugos, I've read quite a few of the winners and the shortlisted books. I recently read Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein, and this book is also about wartime and young people going to war against aliens. I really enjoyed this book. It's the first Heinlein book that I've read, and this won the prize in 1960. Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut was also included on the shortlist for the year of 1960 in the Hugo Awards. I've read that book, and it's been a long time since I've read that one. A lot of Vonnegut's books are about aliens and time travel and semi-close dimensions and war, but honestly, I don't really remember the plot of Sirens of Titan. In 1964, I read the shortlisted novel, also by Kurt Vonnegut, Cat's Cradle. I've recently talked about Cat's Cradle in my 5 favorite sci-fi novels. This is my favorite Kurt Vonnegut novel, so if you want to hear more about it, definitely check out my 5 sci-fi favorites video. In 1966, Dune also won the Hugo Awards, so I've read that one. In 1970, SlaughterhouseFive by Kurt Vonnegut was shortlisted for the Hugo Prize. This is Kurt Vonnegut's most famous novel and most well known. It is about a young man during and after wartime, his experience in World War II, and how he's coping with strange things that are happening in his head and in his timeline. In 1971, the winner of the Hugo Prize was Ringworld by Larry Niven. In 1972, the winner of the Hugo Prize was To Your Scattered Bodies Go, which is the first in the Riverworld series by Philip Jose Farmer. I really, really like Philip Jose Farmer's writing. He's probably one of my favorite classic sci-fi writers. I've read a few books in the Riverworld series. I've also read the first in the Dayworld series and a collection of short stories that is one of my all-time favorite collections of short stories. Riverworld is all about the idea of that when we die, we don't go to heaven or hell, but we go to a different world. And this world is the river world. It's sort of an alien planet, an alien landscape where people are reborn along the river. So you might run into your neighbor that passed away after you've died, or you might run into an ex-president, or you might run into a famous author there. This story follows the main character who has to figure out how this world works and why they're there after they've died. This is a pretty long series. I think there's 5 or 6 books in the series. In 1986, Ender's Game also won the Hugo Award. In 2000, I read a shortlisted book, which was Prisoner of Azkaban by you-know-who, and she was also the winner of 2001 for Goblet of Fire. In 2002, the winner was Neil Gaiman's American Gods. This follows a young man who's down on his luck. While he's doing odd jobs and taking on odd work, he discovers that the world of Norse mythology is not only not myth, but it's not over, and new gods are being created all the time. He has to figure out what his place in this new world that he's discovered is, and as he's doing so, he has trials and tribulations and a lot of run-ins with some very not nice gods. In 2021, the winner for both the Hugo and the Nebula Awards was The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I just finished this book a few weeks ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. This follows several main characters who happen to also be the avatars of the boroughs of the city of New York. This is a world where cities come alive after a certain amount of time. They come alive because people love them, because people care about them, and some of the people who love and care about them the most become their physical avatars and have to help be midwives for the cities to be born. This was a really interesting book. I read it on audio, and I would highly, highly recommend reading it that way. But I think I might want to get a physical copy of this one because, 1, it's a beautiful book, and 2, it was such an interesting read that I think rereading it physically would be a good move in the future. So those are all the book prize books that I have read. I think I covered quite a few bases. I had quite a few book prizes that I looked into, and my stack of books is not that short, which is nice. I read definitely more sci-fi winners than I did contemporary or literary winners. Have you read any of the books that I mentioned here, or have you read any other books that have been winners or shortlisted on different book prizes. Are there any book prizes that I didn't mention that you follow, or do you follow some of these, like Bob the Booker, who religiously follows the Booker Prize? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much. Bye. I recently read that's not Starship Troopers. I keep doing that.